So like I said, I wanted to kind of get our new lecture here. I do briefly want to show you guys, of course, how to download Blender again. Most of you guys have already got it, and that's great, but just in case, and for those who have maybe missed the first few classes, this will be great. So remember, if you just go to the internet, right, whatever browser you want to use, you can go to blender.org, right, blender.org, and it takes you right to here, right? What you do is you go to download Blender. There we go. Now, if you can't install on your device, like say maybe you're at home, you're using your own computer, you can just do the regular download and do a regular install. However, oftentimes with school devices, you don't have permission to install. So what we like to do is we like to instead go to the other versions one down here, right? So instead of this one, we go down to the Mac OS, Linux, and other versions. You click on that, and you'll see there is Windows Portable, and you want to grab that zip file, right? The .zip, right? You click on that, and that will download. Now, depending on if you're wired or Wi-Fi, it could take a while, right? If you're wired, it'll go pretty quick, right? You'll probably have it downloaded in about 10 minutes, maybe 15, depending on your internet speed. Wi-Fi can take longer, so just keep that in mind, right? But, we just go to blender.org, click on that download button. We go not to this one, but to the Mac OS, Linux, other versions. And the zip one will always work, right? Technically, you could try it through Steam, but, and of course, if you have a Mac at home or something like that, you could download the Mac versions, or if you have Linux. But for us, the one that's safest, if you can't install, is the portable one. That's the .zip. You click on that, it'll download it. Once it's downloaded, what you would then do is usually it's going to download straight to, so you can just go to your browser here, right? I don't need that one open. So we go straight to our browser here, and you can just go to the download section, right? Because usually it'll just download straight to downloads. So you can just always click on your little browser folder here. At the bottom, it's like a little manila folder. And there's the Blender one. You double click on it because see how it's got a zipper? It's a folder with a zipper, Blender 3.0. You double click on that, and what it does is it goes to here, and to extract, you can simply just drag this onto the desktop, right? So you can either drag it directly onto the desktop here, or you can even drag it to, like right there, right? So you can even drag it to the options right there. Once you do, it'll start to extract. You'll actually start to see it giving a percentage of extraction, and once it's done, you should eventually see somewhere, desktop, wherever you put it, a folder that says Blender 3.0. Right? See right here, folder. Doesn't have the zipper on it anymore because it's now been extracted. So what I could do is I could double click on that, and when we open this up, it's got all the Blender stuff in here, but you'll see there's the actual Blender executable there. So remember, with portable zip, we're not actually installing Blender. What we're doing is we're extracting that zip folder wherever you want to do it. Usually desktop's good because you can get easy access to it. And what you do is you open that folder, double click on it, double left click, and then you just run Blender from in there. You just double left click on the Blender icon here, because it's the application. And then what it does, of course, is it runs Blender. Now, of course, when you first open Blender for the first time, it'll give you that slightly different screen here. It'll still have this, but you'll see it'll kind of have a different options down here, right? Right now it doesn't because I've already set this up and stuff like that. But you'll see things like one in particular that says shortcuts. It'll be like an option that says shortcuts, and it's got like a little pull-down menu that says Blender. If you click on that, right, it'll give you two other options, Blender 27X and industry compatible. Now, you want to pick industry compatible, right? Now, remember, there's another way to set it up, which I'm going to show you guys momentarily here, but that's kind of what you would do to initially set it up. If you forget, not a big deal because you can switch to industry compatible through preferences in a minute. But this is what will show up usually when you open up Blender for the second time and you're just wanting to work on new things. So in this case, we don't have a file created yet, right? We're going to start to do some lecture today, actually give you something really to build instead of just exploring Blender's interface. So in this case, you have recent files, so if you've been working on stuff recently, it's there. But you also can go New File, and usually I like to click on New File General, right? Also, you can open stuff, right? So if you're trying to work on something that's not in the recent files, you can always go Open and then find it. So there's some cool options there, but I'll also click on General. What that does is it starts us off with our default scene and a cube in there, right? A cube. Now, if you want to change to industry compatible after the fact, right? Like maybe you forgot to, right? Remember, go to Edit, Preferences, right? Edit Preferences. And when you open that up, it brings up your preferences. And there is a section called Key Mapping, right? See how you can click on these? Key Map. And you see right at the top is a little kind of pull-down menu. It's got like a little V pointing down. If you click on that, you'll see there's Blender, Blender 27X. That's kind of what shows up on the shortcuts option when you first run Blender, right? And then there's Industry Compatible. So if you forget to set that up when you first open Blender for the first time, you're okay, right? You can change it later on. We want to use Industry Compatible, right? You'll see Save and Load already has autosave on with an interval of 2 minutes, so that's already on, which is good. So if you Blender crashes, go to the Recover section, autosave. So just kind of remember that, right? And we'll go over some more of these preferences as we go. One of the things that I do like to go is navigation, and I do like orbit around selection. That's a cool thing. You don't need it though right now, but it's cool to have on. It definitely becomes useful when we do sculpting and painting later on. Although even with modeling, it's still pretty useful. And I do like my zoom axis set to horizontal, but that's personal preference. There's no real right or wrong with vertical versus horizontal. I just like horizontal. But key map is the important one of the preferences to make sure to turn on industry compatible, right? Remember, today's quiz is what is shortcut for camera move, right? And that is Alt middle mouse button, right? Alt middle mouse button. Oh, mask up. So Alt middle mouse button is today's quiz, right? Camera move. So just keep that in mind, right? So just kind of some quick reminders about some of those things, because it's our first real video lecture. Like the first 2 days last week, we're just getting you guys downloading Blender, showing you where to get Blender, which I did the short version here today, right? And just getting you guys to see the Blender interface, right? But remember, if you go to our teams, right, there's our assignments. So always in the general section, you'll see there's the first assignments we did, camera rotate, progress check. Remember, progress check is just a screenshot. Particularly this first one was just a screenshot of Blender being open, right? And remember, that is window, save screenshot, right? That's how easy it is right in Blender. Just go to the window menu, save screenshot, and then you just save it right onto the desktop, give it a name, and that's what you'll upload, right? That's what you'll upload. All right. So keep that in mind, right? That's what we kind of want to do with that. Just some quick reminders of those things. All right. So just, a few quick reminders there. Of course, if you go to general section here for our class, you go to Files. Of course, you'll see in the Class Materials folder, right? You'll open this up, and you'll see our syllabus in there, right? So you can always get the syllabus right here in the File section of our class materials. Double click on it, it'll open up the Word document here, and you can see our 3 mini quizzes, right? Our 2 progress checks, and that's what we do generally every week. We do have some other stuff, but those are like at the very end of the term and the middle of the term. So most of your stuff every day is going to be the 3 mini quizzes and the 2 progress checks. Remember, those happen on the mini quizzes happen on Monday, Tuesday. We do have our first progress check on Wednesdays, and then we do a mini quiz on Thursday, and then we do another progress check on Friday. So just some quick reminders of some of these things, right? Pretty straightforward syllabus, because it's got all the important information and basic rules of the class. But I figured it's just good for you guys to kind of see that a little bit. But you go to the general section, you'll always see the daily assignment. And we see today's what is shortcut for camera move. That's Alt middle mouse button. Just like camera rotate was Alt left mouse button, right? Tomorrow our quiz will be camera zoom, and that's Alt right mouse button, right? But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Remember, these mini quizzes are pretty easy, right? You just go view assignment. I just want to make sure to have this for everybody because we have a couple people that just missed the last couple days. Let's go to student view, right? So you just click on it. You'll click on this. It'll open your quiz. Remember, the quizzes are really easy. One is just I participated. So remember, just check I participated, right? That gives you 1 point just for doing the quiz. And then there's the real question, right? What is short for camera move? Alt middle mouse button. Remember, in particular, these first couple, it's about, you guys have never seen these quick keys before. So these quizzes are just a nice, quick, easy way to give you like a quick test on what I was talking about that day, right? Worth not a lot of points, really easy to do. It's just a great little nudge to teach you guys about the quick keys and have you guys do a quick little like, oh yeah, it's that one, Alt middle mouse button. All right, so just some quick reminders about that. I'm eventually gonna have them written on the board too, because the mini quizzes are just meant to be a way for you guys to just look at it and put that answer somewhere, right? But camera rotate is Alt left mouse button, camera move is Alt middle mouse button, and camera zoom is Alt right mouse button. That'll be our mini quiz for tomorrow. But today's quiz, camera move, Alt middle mouse button. Thursday, our first day's assignment was camera rotate, Alt left mouse button. And of course, the progress checks are just those screenshots, right, of where you're at with your model. The first progress check was just have Blender, show me Blender up and running, basically, right? Because those first 2 days were just about getting you guys Blender installed and getting it running. All right, and remember, you can always turn these in this week, particularly since the first couple of days, all that stuff. All right, so just want to do some quick reminders for you guys about that stuff. All right, so just a little bit about that. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is I want to do some real kind of modeling today, because really we were just talking about the introduction of Blender, right? We do have the Cartesian space, right? X, Y, Z are 3D axes, right? X-axis, Y-axis, Z is going up. This is like you'd have in a geometry class, right? When you're graphing equations, right? Positive X, negative X. These grids are units of 1, so 1, 2, 3, X, negative 1, 2, 3, X. Same thing with Y and Z. This is the Cartesian coordinate system that you use in a geometry class. It's just that we have a Z-axis also, right? A Z-axis also. Hence, why it's 3D. And of course, you can see Alt left, camera rotates. Alt middle, camera moves. Alt right mouse button, camera zooms, right? Now remember, the middle mouse button is your scroll wheel, right? You should have a 3-button mouse for this class because, well, that makes life way easier if you've got a 3-button mouse. So either if you have one at home, bring that. Remember, there's ones on top of these computers, so you can always use those as well. And we should have enough for everybody here. But, sometimes a mouse disappears, so we'll, figure it out. But all right. So anyways, Alt left mouse button, camera rotates. Alt middle mouse button, camera moves. Alt right mouse button, camera zooms. Now, one of the other things we want to start to do here, one, remember saving, right? File, save. So as you work, you want to save and save often. It's always a good idea to save a couple of different versions, give it some kind of name that makes sense. Something like 3D modeling B underscore, because usually we use underscore instead of spaces for files. And you can use underscore to say, hey, 3D modeling B underscore table, right? Because that's our class. All right, but saving's right there. Recover is right here. So if you ever have a crash and you're like, oh man, I didn't save for the last half hour. Autosave is on, right? So if you go File, Recover, Autosave, it'll take you to the autosave section where there were some autosaves, right? So really, you can actually recover stuff pretty easily if you need to. All right, so it's good to kind of have some basics for that, right? Saving, recover. Remember, we have these workspaces up here, right? Layouts the default. We're doing modeling right now, so we're going to want to click on the modeling workspace, right? What that does is it kind of gets rid of the little kind of animation keyframe thing on the bottom. It brings up a slightly different menu system here for modeling features, right? These are modeling tools. And of course, it brings up some major modeling tools right here, including things like select, move, rotate, scale, right? So modeling workspace is always a good one to have on when you're modeling, right? Just like eventually we'll sculpt, UV edit, texture paint, and we'll use those workspaces. Remember, over on the right side here, we have our outliner. This is kind of the stuff we were reviewing last week without having you guys really build anything yet. This is kind of getting you guys to play a little bit and get Blender installed. But remember, there's the outliner, which is a list of everything basically in your scene, right? Now, technically, it's also showing our camera and our light. So I usually will just turn the eyeballs off for those, right? So you see I click on the eyeball icon, And what it'll do is it'll kind of look like it's a closed eyeball now, kind of like a really flat U shape, right? And that'll turn the visibility off for the camera and light. You can actually create collections to put these in, but for right now, we're not going to worry about that. So that's kind of cool, right? Gives us that. Now, one of the things I like to always show off, and eventually I'm going to show you guys auto mirror because that'll make it even faster and easier to set up mirror modifiers. But I figure the first day or two, and maybe this first model, we'll manually do it, right? So that way you know how to manually do it. One of the things you can do in 3D is you can model symmetrically, right? You can actually set it up so that what you do on one side happens on the other side. There are two ways to do it. One is the actual, there's kind of like an XYZ up here. In particular, you'll see those if your selection or your move, rotate, scale tool are on, or your sculpt tools. That really only works for shaping, right? That really only works for shaping stuff. So for sculpting and painting, it can be really cool. For modeling, you don't really need it. Because adding loop cuts or doing extrusions, this will not work. So particularly when you're doing the actual modeling, you're building the primary shape and form. You want to actually use a modifier called the mirror modifier. But first, we really like to delete half the model, right? To really have the mirror modifier work properly, you have to have an edge loop down the center of the model. On the axis, you want to mirror it, right? On the axis, you want to mirror it. So what we need to do is we need to put a loop kind of basically either down this way or down this way, right? And then we could delete half the model to set up the mirror modifier, right? So you do want to get rid of half of it and make sure there's an edge right down the center. That way the mirror modifier works properly, right? If you don't do it that way, you get overlap, right? You have two objects overlapping. It looks weird in the center. We really want to only have half the model, so when we mirror it over, it basically takes that half, copies it, flips it over, and links them so that whatever you do to one side happens to the other side, right? So of course, modeling workspace, kind of shows most of the normal interface. Outliner here, this is your properties menu. We'll see the modifiers here in a minute. We see a lot of major tools on the side right here, right? Your selection tool, that's Q, right? Move tool, which is W. These will be on our mini quizzes coming up as well. Tuesdays should be that, and then Wednesdays should be, Thursdays should be the move tool, right? Kind of go in order, if you will. Scale tools, R, rotates E. But we also have tools down here like extrude, Control E, and loop cut, Alt C, right? So some of these already have some great default quick keys. And if you just kind of hover your cursor over the tool, you'll see it kind of pops up and it shows you, hey, there's your shortcut. Oh, W, right? It says kind of W, shortcut cycle W. If you go down here, shortcut cycle Alt C. It's kind of towards the little bottom there. We want to do loop cut. So we go to loop cut tool. Now in this case, X is kind of the mirror option that's on by default. So I tend to just work on the X because it's kind of already set up for that default when you apply your mirror modifier. You can change that though. But in this case, I'm going to put an edge loop down the center here. Now remember, an edge loop, right? An edge is the line between points, right? There, and let's turn this off just to kind of highlight these things really quick. Like I said, today's kind of really reinforcement of the stuff we were talking about last week, but finally in video form and actually doing a little bit of real modeling to kind of start to get us to start to do real stuff today. Remember, we have our edit mode stuff up here. And this is great because it's reinforcement. You guys already got to see this a bit last week. And I keep reteaching this stuff all the time. So if we go to edit mode up here, right, there's kind of this little menu right up here, edit mode. There is object, right, which is your whole object. This is a default cube, right? It says cube right there. And you see in object mode, it's kind of just got this orange kind of highlight around the whole thing. You can left click off or on to select or deselect it, right? Left click selects, or if you click off, deselects. You'll notice that if I click on this object mode pull down up here, there's also an option called edit mode. And you'll see there's quick keys for that. 1 for edit mode, 4 for object mode. So if I go to edit mode, you'll notice what it actually is in is vertex mode. You'll notice there's, in edit mode, you'll see there's a dot, and then there's what looks like a line, and then there's what looks like a quad, a square, right? Remember, quadrangles, or quads for short, are four-sided polygons, polygons with four vertices, right? They don't have to be a square, though. They can be a rectangle. They can be diamond-shaped. It's the number of vertices, 4. Just like a triangle is 3, right? We'll talk about n-gons a little more later on, but for right now, a little bit of quads and triangles. All right, so vertex mode. Remember, a vertex is just a point, right? It's a point in space. So it has location, but it doesn't really have size or a rotation or an angle. It's just a position in space. But you can select them, and you can move, rotate, and scale. There is edge mode, which is 2. It's a button right here, but it's also 2. And remember, an edge is a line between points, right? And then, of course, there's 3, or this button, right? So remember, there's buttons for it. But there also are quick keys, right? 1 is edit mode, which is really vertex edit mode. 4 is object mode. But 2 and 3 are edge and face. And you see face mode, this last one right here, but also 3, is the full polygon, right? It's a shape, right? It's a quadrangle. In this case, a square, but it could be made into a rectangle, and it would still be a quad. So we actually have a polygon, a shape, whereas edges are just a line between the points. And then, of course, there's points, or vertices, vertex, right? So loop cut, as you can see, is really just a way to put in a loop of edges, right? Edge loop initially sounds like Greek, but then when you actually see what it is, you're like, oh, it is a loop of edges, right? So an edge loop is simply just an edge, which is a line between 2 points, and a loop of them is a series of edges that go kind of head to tail around in a loop, right? And a loop is basically kind of a circle. It goes around and meets itself, right? Edge loop. And that's what loop cut does. That's why it's called loop cut. It puts an edge loop in. By default in Blender, if you just left click, it'll snap right to the middle. So if I just left click, it'll put it right in the middle. Of course, I can go to 3 for face mode. And you see loop cut's still on, so I'll probably want to hit Q for selection, right? Remember, Q for quiz, right, is your selection tool, but it is right up here. So I know it's a lot of quickies to start talking about the first couple of days, and that's why we have the mini quizzes to kind of teach you them and do really simple, easy tests for them. But remember, a lot of these tools actually have a button right here when you're in a modeling workspace. Obviously, the ones you kind of have to remember right off the bat are your navigation, right? Alt left mouse button for camera rotate, Alt middle mouse button for move, Alt right mouse button for zoom. Technically, scroll wheel, if you use it as a scroll wheel, will zoom also, but it's a little jumpy. But remember, you could press that scroll wheel down like a button. You don't scroll with it, you just press it down like it's a button, and that's your middle mouse button. That's today's shortcut, right? Camera move. Alt middle mouse button. And Alt on your keyboard is Alt-T. It's right next to your spacebar. So now we've got a loop cut in there. We went to face selection mode, which is right here, but 3 is the quick key for it. And of course, Q is the selection tool right up here, right? But it's the very top tool. And what I can do is I can just kind of left click on that, right? Just left mouse button to select it. If you go to the select menu, you'll see it in the select menu, right? And you'll see there's kind of this nice little menu right below the workspaces. When you have modeling on, you'll see there's select, mesh, vertex, edge, face. So these are some cool menus for other modeling tools that aren't here. So we go to select, and you'll see there's select, more, less. There's actually next active and previous active, which can allow you to grow loops. That is super cool. You'll notice yours don't have those default quick keys. I did add those myself. But up and down arrow are default. But there is, in the select menu itself, a menu called select more or less. And we just go more, and it selects and extends that. So it's kind of like a grow or a shrink, more or less. So whatever polygon or polygon just selected, it'll select the ones next to it, expanding that, right? Giving you more selection. Can you technically select these by hand? Yeah. You would left click, shift left click, shift left click, alt left mouse button, camera rotate, shift left click, shift left click. Shift is add selection. Often in Blender, control is subtract selection, but sometimes shift does both add and subtract. Like the tweak tool, which I'll show you guys not so much on this project because it's our environment, but specifically on our spaceship, we'll see the tweak tool come in much more handy. It's a great tool. That actually uses shift for both add and subtract. But most of the time in Blender, a lot of the time, shift will add selections, control subtract. Now, I'm going to keep repeating this stuff ad nauseum the whole term, right? So this is not the last time I'm going to go over this stuff. But at some point, you guys do have to see it, right? You have to start to be taught it. And as we go, I'll keep reinforcing it. I'll keep reteaching it. Right, we're going to have a review lecture later today after this video's done. I'm not going to go much further. I'm going to kind of do some shaping to it, add a bevel, and then it'll be good and stop for the day, and then we can do some more on it tomorrow. But basically, any way you want to, you can select these polygons, and to get rid of them, to delete them, right, you hit delete on your keyboard, right? There is a key called delete on your keyboard, and it brings up a menu. We want to delete faces. You will probably not see shift delete on yours. That's because that's not a default quick key, right? I added that myself, right? If you right click, you don't have to do this now, you can actually, right, remove the shortcut, but if you right click on something that doesn't have a shortcut, you can assign it. And then it'll ask you to press a key, and I just hold down shift and then delete, and I've just assigned a quick key. That's how easy it is to assign shortcuts for most tools in Blender. Not every tool, but most of them. It's that easy. But I want to delete faces, and if you just hit delete, it will bring up this options menu so that you can just pick faces itself. And that gets rid of them, right? They are gone now. So I go to 4 for object mode, right? Of course, it's up here as well. You can kind of switch your modes. But 4 is the quick key for it. And now what we do is we go over to our properties menu, right? And there's a lot of properties in here. And we'll go over more and more of these as we go on the term. But for right now, I want the blue wrench. I want the blue wrench. Because that brings up this. And you'll see at the very top is add modifier. So I click on that, and it brings this up. Now, you should see most of this. You guys are working right now on smaller devices, smaller monitors. So you might not see all of these. You might have to go, sometimes you'll see like a little triangle at the bottom pointing down. If you go to that and just hold your cursor over it, it kind of auto scrolls down to show you more. You should be fine though, because mirror's usually pretty visible right here. And the add modifier, mirror. What that does is it automatically is set to work on the x-axis. That's why I put the edge loop this way and deleted the polygons on this side, because that's the red, which is X, right? So that's automatically set to X-axis. You can actually pick a bunch of axes. We don't really need it for this one, but I'll show you a little bit how you can do that neat stuff with that for like the legs, the table legs, because we're going to do the tabletop today, or at least start the tabletop. I usually like to have this triangle on right here though, right? See how there's now a modifier in here? If you don't see these right now, that's because you haven't turned the add-on on yet. I'm going to show that to you later this week. So don't worry about these being there or not being there right now, because you don't really need them right this minute. I just have them set up because they are useful. We just don't need them quite yet. But this triangle right here, it's kind of the very front. You click on that, and that shows the full mirror, wireframe, and everything, your selection on both sides when you're in edit mode. In fact, you'll see it says on cage. Adjust edit cage to modify result. So I usually like to have the triangles on to kind of see the full effect of the full mirror even in edit mode. We also like to have clipping on. However, I'm going to go to say 2 for edge mode, or actually even 3 for face mode right now. Remember, 3 for face, but that is edit mode, so technically if you just hit 1, it'll go to edit mode, and then you can pick the face icon here, but 3 is a great quick key for it. And you'll notice that I can select polygons on one side, and it selects them on the other. That's what's so cool about mirror. Now, if clipping is unchecked, see how it's unchecked? When I go to the Move tool, which is right here, W for left click, right? You see when I move it, it pulls that apart, right? They don't stay together. That's what clipping does when you turn that on. Is when I go to move this, it keeps that center edge loop together. So clipping is super, super cool and very useful for lots of modeling. Not appropriate for everything you're going to do with mirror, but most of the time, really, really awesome. Now, like I said, I'm going to repeat this stuff a bunch. I'm going to do a bunch of repeat lecture on this stuff this week. I mean, really, we're just going to focus on building a table most of the week, just to get you guys used to it, not rush our first model. But these are some of the things you have to do to start to get this set up. Now, at this point, what I could do is I could easily just, left click on that face. W for move, although it is right here. Brings up your move tool. If you left click drag, right, you hold down the left mouse button on this blue arrow, you'll see how it kind of highlights a little bit brighter. I can move this down, right? If I want to, I could select all of this. There is actually a tool in here, select linked. It's right bracket usually, which is kind of like those parentheses but more square. But it is in the select link menu. I changed it to spacebar because I use it a lot, and spacebar I think is a cooler quick key for it. Select linked selects everything. Selects all the polygons. So if I want to, I can hit R for scale. All right, R for scale. It is right here. Move, rotate, scale. And I could grab the green square, right? You see how it's got a manipulator a lot like the move tool? Except it's instead of like arrows, it's kind of like little boxes on the end. Or instead of cones, it's boxes. I'm going to left click drag on that green, right? Just to kind of make it longer this direction. And I could always left click drag on the blue to make it smaller that direction. And even the red to scale it this direction. So see how you could turn your scale tool on and you could adjust size, right? Move is to change the position of a polygon, edge, or vertex. Scale is allowing you to change the size of a polygon, edge, or vertex, or in this case, all of the linked polygons. So all of a sudden, you see we've kind of got this started up, right? In fact, if I want to move this up, I can always, select the face, select linked, grab the blue arrow to bring it up so it's kind of a little bit more above the grid. And at this point, what we could do is, like I said, I really want to stop here so that I can give you guys, I can start to upload this video, and then I can just give you guys some lap time to work and get help. What I do want to do briefly is I want to show you guys the bevel tool, right? Because we probably want this table to be a bit rounded on the corners, right? So I'm going to go to 2 for edge mode, right? 2 for edges. Remember, it's edit mode, right? So if you just click 1, it'll go to edit mode, and then you can click on the button, that middle one. But 2 is the click for edge mode. Remember, if you don't want the move, rotate, or scale tools up, just hit Q. Remember, it's that tool right there for selection. And I can just left click on that edge. Remember, Alt left mouse button rotates camera, Alt middle mouse button moves camera, Alt right mouse button zooms. And I can go down Shift left click to select that back edge so that I've kind of got this corner and this corner. And there is a tool in Blender right here called Bevel. And there's actually a quick key for that, Control B. Control B. But if I click on Bevel, it turns the tool on. There is a handle right here, but if you just left click drag, or middle mouse click drag, so usually middle mouse button will kind of do the main function of your tool oftentimes. So if you just middle mouse drag, you see how it takes that edge and it breaks it into 2 edges and it moves them away from each other equal distance, creating kind of a cut at a 45-degree angle. Whenever you see these yellow handles, those will control that also. Now at this point, I don't really want to do it again, right? I don't want to hit middle mouse button again because I've done the bevel. I let go of middle mouse button. What I want to do is, you see on the bottom left corner here, you'll see there is a menu that says Bevel. If I click on the word Bevel down here in the bottom left corner, it opens this up, which is all your options. That's where, if you want to adjust this width, you could do it again. And of course, there's a bevel modifier to do this, but usually we'll do it without modifiers. And there is something called segments right below width. And I can just left-click drag to give that more edges. And of course, there are these little, kind of arrows that'll let you. And you see as we add a couple of segments, like 3, it adds more edges, but it also rounds the shape. If I want to make that wider, I can. If I want to make that smaller, I can. Kind of depends on the table you want to make. And see what this does, and that's all we have to really worry about here. Blender has pretty nice bevel tools, lots of options, but we don't need to go into all that stuff yet, right? But remember, down here in the bottom corner, as long as the tool's active, middle mouse will drag it. If I middle mouse drag again, it'll start to bevel what we already have, which we don't want to do, right? So that's why we bevel. And then if I want to adjust, we click on that little button down in the bottom corner. Q is your selection tool, right? That is a great way to turn off whatever your active tool is. Q. Q for quiz, Q for quit, right? It's right up here, Q. There's that tool right there. It's your selection tool, so it's harmless, and it turns off whatever tool you were in. Now at this point, I can always go File, Save, or even Save As for the first time. I could save this down here, so we go and we click down here to highlight, and I can call this, 3D modeling B underscore table. And desktop should be fine, right? So I can always go to desktop if I want to. And now I have that table started. All right. With that being done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording, and then I'll upload it for you guys, and that'll be it.